of all, I want to just congratulate you on the stiff upper lip with which you approach this new challenge. This is an unusual circumstance for all of us. We have already been beset with our own technical difficulties here in the judges' room, and we can only imagine what it is taking you to prepare as you have for this new world of competition. So if I am right, this is the Wisconsin wild card Wauwatosa West, not to be confused with Wauwatosa East. Is that right?
Correct.
Very true.
Excellent. So we are your Unit 2 judges. My name is Lynn Uzzell, and I teach American politics at the University of Virginia. And Mr. Draper, if you will.
My name's Lindsey Draper. By the way, I don't know what to do with my hands either, for those of you who had some concerns about that. I'm from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, and actually have a son who graduated from Wauwatosa West. Okay.
Good afternoon. I don't know what to do with my hands either. I'm a hand talker, so I'm really at a disadvantage, but I'll do my best. My name is Trey Delap. I have a few roles here. I'm an alum of the program. I competed when I was in high school at the national level, and that was exciting. I live in Nevada. I'm not going to say where. In addition to being an alum, I'm also I have a private company that does lobbying at the state level, primarily state and local level. And I also am the executive director of the Nevada Center for Civic Engagement, which is the new home in Nevada for the We the People programs. So super excited about all of this.
Now, please introduce yourselves and your teachers.
Hello, we are Unit 2 representing Wauwatosa West. I'm Bella Minahan.
I'm Aiden Ho.
I'm Grace Dykstra.
And I'm William Meyer.
And we're here on behalf of our teaching assistants, mentors, and teacher, Mr. Chad Mateski.
Well, excellent, and welcome. So without further ado, let me read your Unit 2 question, which is number 1. The state sent delegates to the Philadelphia Convention to join with other states, quote, in devising and discussing all such alterations and further provisions as may be necessary to render the federal constitution adequate to the exigencies of the Union, end quote. To what extent, if any, did the delegates follow their instructions? What experiences of state governments under their new constitutions after independence might have influenced the creation of the Constitution? Do the decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court function as a continuing constitutional convention? Why or why not? You may begin.
In 1787, delegates from each of the 13 states were invited to the Philadelphia Convention to correct the defects of the Articles of Confederation, the initial intent of the convention. A central principle that guided their decision-making was the need to fix pressing issues that had been plaguing the nation since the implementation of Confederate government. With this idea in mind, they abandoned their original goal of simply revising the Articles, instead creating a durable document that would safeguard principles of government through a system of checks and balances known as Madisonian democracy.
Nearly a year before the Philadelphia Convention, there was a convention in Annapolis to revise taxation under the Articles of Confederation. Unfortunately, only 6 delegates attended, making it impossible for them to accomplish anything. After the failed convention in September of 1786, debt rebellions such as Shays' Rebellion and mass bankruptcy continued to mount, which mobilized more delegates to take constitutional revision seriously.
The lack of a reliable and widely accepted currency due to a lack of gold and silver created many problems for the nation. Citizens, merchants, and the government were all plunged into a cycle of debt. Merchants were unable to fully engage in the American economy because of the lack of uniform currency, which left Americans struggling to stimulate their own state economies and make a living, much less pay back debt for the Revolutionary War.
When states came to tax their citizens to pay debts and were met with nothing, it created a downward financial spiral. All of this sparked rebellions, most notably in Massachusetts. These issues were solved with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, which grants Congress the power to coin money and to regulate its value. And Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12 allows Congress to raise armies for a period of time to help curb insurrection.
The federal constitution also borrowed ideas from early state constitutions that were working well. A bicameral legislature was found in all but 2 state constitutions and proved to be an effective model. This new Congress replaced the Continental Congress, which had an informal and unorganized structure that more closely resembled the convention than our current system. In addition, a weak, false figurehead was appointed part of the Continental Congress that couldn't effectively help the nation, so New York's constitutional provision that provided for a singular executive was adopted at a federal level.
The Supreme Court's role in constitutional adaptation can be viewed in multiple ways. Structurally, the convention was much different than our judicial process now because court justices are not appointed by the people to represent their opinions and therefore do not consult the American public. The structure of the judicial system is different in the way that every time the justices make a decision, they don't have to have their decisions debated by state conventions and subsequently ratified by them as well.
Although structurally, Supreme Court decisions do not function as a continuing constitutional convention, the impact of their decisions do. Their decisions can function as quasi-amendments, which protect the rights of the people without any addition to the Constitution. This allows the Constitution to act as a living document that is interpreted differently as opinions change, yet preserves the same principles the founders ingrained in it at the time of its writing. Thomas Jefferson endorsed this view, saying, "Laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind."
During the Constitutional Convention, James Monroe wrote to James Madison saying, "We all look with great anxiety to the result of the convention at Philadelphia. Indeed, it seems to be the sole point on which all future movements will turn." Every American was depending on the document to stabilize the turbulence that had descended upon the nation since the Revolution. This pressure made the delegates strive for greatness, reinforcing our stance that the delegates did accomplish their goal of creating a more perfect union. Thank you. This now concludes our statement, and we are ready for your follow-up.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that excellent opening statement. Let me open up by asking, you had said that there were definitely some exigencies which needed to be addressed and that the Constitution did address those exigencies. But I'm wondering, did they do so by going beyond what their mandate was? In other words, is their decision to essentially scrap the articles rather than revising them, did that result in an illegitimate usurpation of power?
The complete scrapping of the articles was legitimate because of the reason that the delegates that were at the Annapolis Convention authorized the Philadelphia Convention and gave themselves the power to do this based on what the states had requested.
A big problem with the Articles of Confederation was the unanimity clause. This made it necessary for all decisions made under the government to be unanimous. So it would be impossible to revise the articles because every state needed to agree on every decision that would lead to an amendment.
The Constitution is a legitimate document because they had the 9 states that ratified it, making it the higher law of the land.
In addition, the tariff wars and problems with currency in the Confederation period needed to be fixed desperately. And in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the Constitution, they fixed that by forbidding states from coining their own money.
I don't want to go real far from this point, but in your statement, you talked about the Supreme Court as not being elected by the people. It sort of seems to me, based on the answer that you just gave and based on what happened at the Philadelphia Convention, that it really didn't matter what the people said or what the legislatures who sent people to Philadelphia. People at the convention did what they wanted to do. Is that what happened?
No. Certain states were sent with certain instructions. For example, Delaware was sent with the instruction to, 1, amend the articles, but also not to violate Article 5, which says that all problems decided by a Congress, each delegate gets 1 vote, and they were told when going to the Philadelphia Convention that they could not violate Article 5 of the Articles of Confederation.
In addition, Rhode Island had the same concern that you outlined in your question, and they did not send any delegates because they were afraid that the convention would create a new set of laws that would give too much power to the national government.
Sounds like they were smart.
They
Also, North
they were
Carolina.
smart because they were simply preventing tyranny of the majority, which is an opinion expressed by de Tocqueville. And they weren't simply a group of elite nationalists. They were doing what they saw best for the people as they saw rebellions and other problems breaking out across the nation.
Also, North Carolina instructed their delegates to do whatever is necessary to effectively revise the articles or whatever is necessary to save the federal government.
Thank you.
I think what you mentioned was there was a major concern of loss of power for the states. States were concerned about losing their power to do whatever. Let's fast forward a little bit to after the Civil War and the Reconstruction and the doctrine of incorporation. So we established these standard baseline rules at the federal level, but they don't apply to the state until they are incorporated. Is that a preservation of a state's power, or is that an inadequacy of federal power, or what? How would you view that?
I would say that that's a mechanism of federalism, and that the way incorporation works, although it is a tedious process to slowly incorporate each of the amendments through the given court cases that they are incorporated through, I think it's an important process.
I agree. I believe that it helps the states' rights, it maintains states' rights, because it prevents, while the Constitution and their amendments are the higher law of the land, if states don't have the issues occurring to them, they don't have to incorporate the individual clauses of each amendment until a problem arises that needs the incorporation.
Would, just a quick follow-up, in that regard, if the state doesn't have a structure where they violate certain fundamental civil rights, as individuals, are they deprived of equal protection?
If they were to be deprived of equal protection, then those individuals in the states could bring cases against their states, and they could bring it up to the Supreme Court so then that they would get that incorporated and they would have their rights protected.
I'm concerned. I think we don't have time for me to do anything but my question. Yeah.
About 20 seconds.
Okay, very quickly. Other than Shays' Rebellion and the mass bankruptcy, what were problems calling for a new document? Well, there it is. Okay. Good job.
Hooray. All right. Well, once again, I just want to say that you guys are doing a marvelous job, but just by showing up, just by pushing through, in spite of all of the challenges that we've all had to face. But in addition to that, I thought that you did a really wonderful job in demonstrating knowledge of not just the Philadelphia Convention, but the period surrounding the Philadelphia Convention and the consequences thereof. I thought that you did a great job of laying out certain tricky distinctions, especially with respect to the Supreme Court and the controversial question as to whether or not their outcomes are they have the result of constitutional amendments or not. I thought you did a nice job of providing nuance to that question, and you were very prepared for fielding our follow-up questions. So well done.
One of the pieces that I always worry about if I get to see the Wauwatosa West team is, will I be fair? Will I be harder on them in an effort to not look like I'm being kind to them? And I don't have a whole lot of difficulty. You all did an excellent job, and I'm not worried that I'm saying that with my heart as opposed to my head. There were a couple of references that I found particularly important. The fact that you did a connection between the New York Constitution and what ultimately showed up, the fact that the bicameral legislature, the body of how we will do things, was another issue that I thought was important to hear about. I saw a number of the pieces that I wanted to be helping put this answer together. Very good job.
Thank
I
you.
agree with each of my colleagues. I think this was very interesting, and I think you did a good job. On the topic of bias towards a team I might have an affiliation with, I don't have one, but if I did, I would be equally brutal, if not worse, on those who I know and love. So, but I will be equally brutal on you, but you did a great job. What I, of course, liked was thinking about, and I think this might be something to think about a little bit more, is when we're talking about states' rights and the rights of the federal government under the Constitution, popular sovereignty is derived from the power of the people, and those people are individuals that live in states. So if we, while we certainly want to preserve state rights over national rights, what are the people's rights and who is best designed to serve the people? And I think that's a indirect theme of the whole conversation at the convention and how this was going to work. But I think the treatment of the question that you laid out, and certainly addressing the Supreme Court issue, is good. But and then you were dynamic and engaging and balanced in your follow-up responses. So I was very impressed with your presentation. Thank you.